thanks for inviting me to this. I'm very low-keyed actually in what I do in the outside world, but because I'm involved in ISER, which is a very special organization, it's unprecedented historically, I'm very happy to provide any skills that I have to not only support ISER, but also for mankind as well. So this is going to be a fast-paced presentation, and any questions you have, you can ask me after. So I won't be taking any Q&A because of the duration of time I have to give this presentation. So I'll go straight into it right now, and you can slow me up if I'm going too fast. It's going to be non-technical, and any questions you have on a technical nature, hopefully I'll be happy to answer them after the presentation. So here we go. And I'll explain all these things here. The recognition event, it's left as rather an enigma. And this is leading to the roadmap for contact. So it's not just an ISER proposed concept for the world, and we're hoping that what you heard there yesterday about San Marino, if they accept the partnership with ISER and CUNE, then this would lead to the United Nations, and this would be one of the aspects, not just the recent announcements by the Pentagon in the last 4 years to do with the existence of UAP, but guess what? UAP has intelligence, and there's a means of contact, and I shall be going into all that now. So let's bring it to an advanced level. All right. So this is the global communications of UAP or UFOs, depending on you want to be politically correct, UAP, of extraterrestrial civilizations or non-human intelligence. This is a really complex area, but I will be bringing in specific aspects of this. You've got to start small, and it's incremental. If you try to do the whole thing on a bigger scale, it won't work. But if you start small, it should work. And this is what I've been going through here to do with the concept proposal. This is ISER's Contact Project. So, as I said, it's non-technical presentation, and any scientific papers or materials, publications, I will be very happy to provide those. I'm not going to go through any of those details here. I just want to give you the message, so to speak, how this is going to be done. I will be providing some observable evidence to show that not only is the UAP or UFOs real, but due to the censorship for the last 70 years by world governments, it's an extraordinary reality. So it's not just the UFOs are in existence, are real, but you have, in order to deal with this whole area, you have to deal with a larger reality, and I'm actually going into, I'll be going into this with you. So the ISER has two groups. One is the scientific research group, and the other is a contact research group. So remember that yesterday ISER was only launched on the 25th of May, but within that time, we've managed to put specific groups together, and we're not only researching this, but we're actually carrying out different actions as well. So, here's the concept proposal. It's on a global level, but it requires organization and structures. It requires technologies, because we're living on the Earth. We're physical beings within the space-time, and guess what? People need bells and whistles to see the evidence. So in all due respect to the thousands of contactees around the world, and there are millions in fact, and also the different groups around the world that have had substantial encounters, you know, with craft and humanoids, etc., that hasn't got to the public. And this is where ISER comes in. And this can be done on a global scale. And this is a citizens' initiative by everybody, and so it's spearheaded by ISER, which, as you know, is an international NGO, and it's without governments. It's without the military, non-essential agency. They all have their agendas. Citizens can, on a collective basis, who are well aware of the larger reality and all the different experiences entailed, want something like this to happen. It won't happen with governments. However, the governments will come into it later on. We're not leaving them out in all this. So, anyway, I'll okay, I think once we recognize that the ET, UAP, and NHI are monitoring the Earth, and there's no doubt about that, they're certainly watching the behavior of different organizations and governments, how they operate, and I won't go into any detail on that. One of the very good examples, of course, is the correlation between nuclear missiles and UFOs. There's a definite correlation there. So we need, in order to understand the whole UAP, UFO area and all the experiences, we need to deal with a larger reality. Now, everybody on this planet, within this space-time, have all these type of experiences. This is our accepted social reality, societal reality, current science, official history, and so forth. A lot of it is a complete illusion. Look at all these areas, from the Earth, the collective consciousness, the Earth energies. Even before history, recorded history, we have all these traditions, megaliths, mythologies. Beyond the Earth, we have extraterrestrial life, astrology, advanced astronomy, which could be quantum mechanics, and then we got the future, prophecies, precognition. So, so then we have our accepted individual reality. And in this, we have, again, the Earth, the altered states, psychic experiences, and then before birth, past lives, reincarnation. I'm just giving examples of all these different experiences. Outer space, UFO experiences, outer-body experiences, channeling, etc. And then after death, the survival after, near-death experiences, spirit communication, possession, etc. So that we're dealing with a larger reality here. So, what is the recognition event? The recognition event, believe it or not, it's rather like a black swan. Now, black swans are not rare, they're found in Australia. But I'm using what I call the Dragon King. The Dragon King is a rarity. It's so what I'm saying here is that the most consequential Dragon King in human history has arrived. It's been here all the time, but okay, it's just the announcement of it, the existence of it is here. So one is dealing with exceptional global circumstances on an unprecedented historical scale. So the implications of a discovery of extraterrestrial life has played a constitutive role in the historical censure of the UAP. So as I was saying earlier on, it has been censored for a long time. So I'm bringing in metaphysics. Okay, the term itself is dealing with the larger reality, the nature of reality and existence. Just as I showed you there, just two of the slides. We're dealing with the nature of reality, existence, and who we really are. And in that, in recent times, we have quantum theory, quantum physics. That's all within metaphysical sciences. And other things to do with consciousness, neuroscience, which have been proven. The intention experiment, the global coherence initiative. These are demonstrations of human thought changing the dynamics in the universe to create change. So there's actually no escape from metaphysics. So, so physics needs metaphysics. Now, back in the past, Kepler and Newton were involved in alchemy or metaphysics. This was acceptable at the time. Galileo was well aware of metaphysics, metaphysical science, but took a safer route because of its circumstances. However, there was a transformation in culture from metaphysics into the mechanistic sciences from around the 1840s. And so we end up back 200 years ago, governments then started investing in resources, not only in the sciences, but also in medicine and many other areas. So this was totally mechanistic. That's what we've got today, this mechanistic reality in society. So it's the investment in what I call technicians. Now, I'm going to quickly go into some of the observable features of UFOs. It's a very quick one to show you. And this is to do with UFOs and patterns and cycles. This has been provable, all right? And there have been some researchers like Bruce Cathey, Amy Michelle, and others. And this is some of the papers that were published dealing with a theory on UFOs, showing the patterns and cycles. And I'll just go into it very briefly. So it's very rare to have a theory on UFOs, but this is pertaining to showing that based on 30,000 reports going back to the 1880s, and then selecting the best cases which would be absolutely reliable in their timing and their observation. So 1,500 cases were taken. I actually worked with another guy called Roy Dutton, an aerospace engineer back in the early 90s. And what we show over the years, and you can see the papers on this, some of them have been banned, rejected over the years because UFOs don't exist in science, so you can imagine the consequences of that. And so what it's showing is that we've proven that we have a controlled, autonomous surveillance of the Earth. Now, this was suggested by James MacDonald back in 1968 at Congress, after 2 years of research with a team of scientists. So at Congress, his conclusion was, we're dealing with some sort of surveillance. That's the quotation. That was an inspiration for me personally to look into this. If there's a surveillance, how are they doing it? Well, we know how they're doing it now after years of work, and we can show that the UFOs are on specific orbital tracks around the Earth. These are not artificial satellite orbital tracks. These tracks are synchronized with the rotation of the Earth, synchronized with the 24-hour rotation for this to work, or should I say for this model to work. I'm not going to go all the details here, but just give you a flavor of what we're dealing with here. So there is a paper regarding this. There was actually some difficulty. This is in SETI now. There was some difficulty in getting this published, because when I presented this 20 years ago, it caused some consternation, and I won't go into all the details. And the paper was nearly banned. I had to get a lawyer. A lawyer? It's unbelievable. In order to get this paper published. So if you want any details about this, I can give you the details. But basically, what we can show here is that you'd have a stealth type UFO craft in the upper stratosphere. This would deliver at particular times the probes, we'll call them. Now, this is one category of UFOs we're dealing with here. So you'd have probes that would appear on a much lower altitude for some number of minutes. This is the typical observations taking place by people from all around the world. And then on another orbital track, we call it the retrieval track. So it's actually retrieving these UFOs, and they would go then to this craft, we'll call it, in the upper stratosphere. So this is a continuous process going on. So this has been tested out in a number of countries, in actually 27 locations, to see if this works. And it's very important that the timing is accurate from the observers, like from the reports when you input this into the model for the model to work. So timing is really important. And on various occasions, within literally plus or minus 10 minutes, the UFO would turn up, and then we would get a recording. Now, this has been shown on television. It's been very low-keyed, a lot of this stuff. There's editorial discretion over the last 25 years on this stuff. And it's been very frustrating and annoying to anybody that's researching this field. So, I'm going into instrumented UFO research. So you're instrumenting it, you're trying to get recordings from a scientific point of view. And the first actually one was Project Starlight International. So it goes back to the 1976. That was private. Project Identification, that was with one of the universities in the States. And they got results. Project Hestelin, 1984. And we have the honor of having Erland Strand, who happens to be here. He's one of the pioneers. He's here in the audience to do a Project Hestelin. And then the SETI Kingsland, started in 2000. And then we have the Galileo Project with Professor Avi Lowe from Harvard. That initiative was taken there only 2 months ago. And again, this is an astrophysical approach to the UAP. You know, how do we get useful data? So I'll just briefly go through this quickly. So the scientific research can provide, hopefully that is, depending on the design of the instrumentation, new information about the structure of UFOs. Now you may wonder, well, what's the point of all this? Well, I think it's pretty important actually, because of the, how shall I put it, in society that we have at the present time. They want evidence for this, okay? So this, we can discover, hopefully, new aspects, and which we have already. And new energy fields, spectra, determine the composition of UFOs, etc., etc. There is 2 published papers showing data of this kind. And so this was SETI Kingsland because I initiated this back in 2000. And now, the reason why this was set up and established at this location is because there was an intersection using the model, the astronautical theory model, that these orbital tracks just happen to be intersecting at a particular location on the Earth. And that's why I relocated to this location and established, now this is all private because you will not get grants and funding from any governments or departments of astronomy dealing with this kind of stuff. So this was set up. It's an all-sky camera system. And this not only covers the whole sky, but there's thousands of squares on this virtual sky where if a UFO, now you have to understand something about the characteristics of UFOs. UFOs can just appear, or they can be just moving in a linear fashion. It could be zigzagging around. So you have to know the velocities beforehand from historical data. So this instrumentation was designed specifically for that kind of recordings. So this involved infrared, because it's been discovered back in 1976 through the Starlight International instrumentation research that UFOs operate in the infrared. So infrared was used in this. Also, in this case, when you have studied the whole UFO area, in particular cases with individuals' experiences, I came across 3 individual cases where they had rashes on their body. This was due to the ultraviolet, possibly gamma rays, and in that light, I set up a gamma ray detector system in the hope that we might pick up the gamma ray side of a UFO. So it's covering a wide spectrum of bands in the electromagnetic spectrum. So this is the new robotic telescopes in Spain, in southern Spain, and one of these has been developed specifically to record UFOs not only in near Earth, but possibly within the actual confines of the environment in the area. And but in this particular case, this wasn't based on the model. In other words, the location is not based on the intersection of orbital tracks, because there are other tools you can use dealing with consciousness where you can vector in the UFO and to hopefully get the recordings from it. So it's not just a mechanistic approach, there's also the experiential. And this is where the scientists miss out. So you need to know something about UFOs, the characteristics. This is the typical type of situation you have to do with landings, also when they're leaving, and typically go through these different colors. So these colors is a resonance. There's a resonance, different frequencies that go through. And if we take one category of the UFO area, and this is purely theoretical now, what I'm presenting here, is that you're dealing with a different space-time to the observer. So, you know, when someone says to you, oh, there's no, you know, sharp images of UFOs. Well, of course there isn't, because we're dealing with a different space-time from the UFO to the observer. So you get a distortion. So all these images are distorted due to the space-time difference. We're physically physical beings in our space-time. The UFOs are in a different space-time. So how could they be doing it? Well, my guess is that, and this is where consciousness comes into this, is one of the factors that's not in the equation for science or the metaphysics. How I think they're doing it is that the occupants, now we're assuming it's not artificial intelligence here, but if we're dealing with physical beings, they're applying natural things, non-linear concepts in the universe. And we actually have all those characteristics to apply this. And that is they're at one with the craft. So they're using consciousness with the craft. There's a molecular change can take place with the craft, because you have to realize and you have to remember we're all multi-dimensional beings. The whole universe has multiple realities, multiple dimensions. So I think this is how they're actually doing it. So in other words, if you were there on the Earth with your craft and you're able to do this, you accelerate to reach the speed of light, and then you would flip into what's called hyperspace. You're into non-time. So we have us, space and time as physical beings, but when you're doing this, you're in a space, but there's no time. So in order for this to work. And then you would decelerate to your stellar system, wherever that may be, could be 500 light years away, but this may only take hours, not 500 years at the speed of light with a rocket, which is impossible, of course. So I'm suggesting actually the occupants are consciously resonating with the structure of the craft in order to be one with it. This is just a representation. So if you're, okay, let's say extraterrestrial civilization. Okay, an extraterrestrial civilization that's advanced enough, hasn't gone the route we've gone through science and medicine, etc., it'd have to be cooperative. In our case, on this earth, we're not exactly cooperating with each other. We're not aligned with the earth. There's a complete disconnect from nature. And this is represented in what we have in society. In the case of an extraterrestrial civilization that's advanced enough, has evolved, they've evolved as an entity, say a biological entity, are well aware of the faculties that they would have, and so forth. And they would be aligned with their own planet, dealing with planetary affairs, and then they could extend out from there to other stars. Now, if we were trying to do that, like we are trying to do this, which I have my grave doubts at this stage, the way we're doing it, they say they were going to another star system with planets that are, say, 50 light years away from them. They're not going to use the electromagnetic spectrum. Forget about it. It's completely futile. So what would you use? You use what's provided in the universe. And that is, we'll call it I hate going into any technicalities here, but we're dealing with telepathy. We're dealing with communication, faster than light communications. If I was using my smartphone from Barcelona to somebody in Sydney, there's a time difference, 1/3 of a second. It's not an issue because we're on the Earth here, but guess what? If you're going out there to Mars, there's a 15-minute difference in communication. So therefore, it's futile if you're dealing with interstellar travel, interstellar communications. So, as I've just pointed out there, I suspect actually the communications is using some sort of telepathy. So, preparing for contact, this is some of the basics, and I'll just quickly run through this. So, eventually we'll have to develop our consciousness to practice this, rather like muscles, going to the gym and, getting stronger from exercise. Likewise, using telepathy. We can all do it. We actually have it there. We have all these characteristics within the human being to carry out this. And this is all part of the wide spectrum of reality, this larger reality. So, we have some things in common with extraterrestrials of all different types. That ones are here, maybe here from an historical point of view, before historical records, to maybe others that are coming here as visitors. And that is non-linear concepts. And this goes back to the metaphysics again. What could be used in this? Well, it's certainly not the electromagnetic spectrum, which works on waves. We're dealing with what's called scalar waves. Now, scalar waves, we actually already emit scalar waves as human beings. And this is all part of consciousness. So it's this type of wave. It's a very compressed wave that could be used for the communication. The Chinese, just recently, after 20 years of research into the quantum communications area, are leading into, believe it or not, and it wouldn't surprise me that Chinese can do this, quantum superluminal communications. We have a dichotomy in physics in the Western world. Any scientists in the Western world in the last 10 years say, it's impossible, forget about it. The Chinese are already working on it. So this is a dichotomy in science again. There's this full conditioning in the physics area, in the sciences, in the Western world, that is holding us back in all these areas.
10 minutes.
So, 10 minutes. Oh, gee. Okay. So there's been some development in this area. Experimental prototypes we're doing in SETI Kingsland. We've been unsuccessful so far. We've been going since 2016. But the operator, the communications operator, has to be in real time dealing with this instrumentation. So this is the antennae that we developed. But unfortunately, none of this is working. But this is all part of science. It's an experiment. So I won't go into that. We've abandoned that. But anyway, just repeating myself, the communication is instant communications we're dealing with. It doesn't matter what the reality is. In our space-time, we have one reality with a number of dimensions. In this case here, it's not just the communication within our space-time, but also other realities with other dimensions. So there's a complete multi-universe we're dealing with multiple dimensions. So two-way communication, you have to have the right resonance to do this. And I'm sorry, I'll have to quickly go through this, but it's possible maybe to eavesdrop on the communications if we were successful dealing with, application of technology involved in this, and possible two-way communication. So it's a combination of two disciplines, the scientific and the mechanistic side and the experiential. You need the two to work. So it's you need a co-creative scientist. This is a completely new type of scientist that is needed to do this. This works, by the way, but that's not acceptable, or there's complete ignorance when you're dealing with something like this in the sciences. So this is the contemporary scientist. So it's not, the scientist is not, I'm just taking the scientist as one example, it could be in medicine, but they're not consciously connected with nature intelligence. Nature intelligence is the most important thing. We are nature. So if you disconnect from it, it's not going to work. So you need this partnership, a true partnership, not egos, not an ego. Like, I want this, I want that. It won't work. You've got to have a true partnership with nature intelligence for this to work, and particularly dealing with extraterrestrial intelligence, because that's how they're working. So I won't go through all the advantages because of the time factor, and I was going to go into the first contact style, but I'm just going to jump into what ISA is doing. This is to do with post-contact protocols, and this is really necessary in order to create a shift on this planet. And I won't go into all the details there, but I'll just go into briefly how we could become a member of the cosmic community. So through sensitization, preparation, and first contact. So we've actually been going through sensitization, through research studies, publications, media, television, documentaries.
Speak slowly.
Media, going through documentation, magazines, conferences, and so forth. Phase 2 is the preparation, raising awareness on a global basis and upgrading post-contact protocols. Enable communications with extraterrestrial civilizations, UAP, possibly. Creating networks, scientists, artists would be involved in this. And phase 3 is the contact, to publicly inform the public, so to speak, about the existence, not only the existence of ISA, but also leading into the United Nations for the possible contact. And phase 4 would be the new era we'll be going into. So you have before contact process, and then after contact. So you need we'll call it like a committee dealing with this, because it's not only the human as a collective would have an agenda, if there's pure intention behind it, no government, military involved in this because they have their own agendas. Because if they were involved, you can forget about it. They won't deal with us up there. They're monitoring all this at the moment, and they're just waiting for us to make the effort for the contact to happen. Now, contact has happened, but we've got to be done on a collective basis. And I'm proposing this for ICER as the one way to deal with this. And so we need to find out who they are, etc. And it's the beginning of an intercultural and scientific exchange. And this not only can be done on a global basis, but you'd have nodal points, you'd have centers around the world in order to carry this out on a 24/7 basis. And so you'd select these nodal points or centers around the world, and you'd have to select the contactees. That's really important because you can't have any old contactee here. This would be a process one have to go through to have the right human beings with the right attitude aligned to planet Earth for this to take place. So after that, you need to training the contactees for the communications, how to do it. I'm just going to briefly go through that without 2 or 3 minutes. So this would be, and as I said, after, if there's any questions, I can meet you after, but this is what we're talking about here. And I'm sorry it's going through fast here because of the time factor. So anyway, hopefully you can read some of this that's here. So this is actually a template, how to do this, all right, in some detail. And then it goes into the principles and application of how the communication operator could apply themselves with this. You'd have teams in different centers around the world, and you're in sync. You're all doing the same thing with the same extraterrestrial civilization. All right? So I'm not going to go through all the different steps in the template, but these are the steps of the communication, of how to do it, what's required for it. And then, you know, you have a range of people, you know, from medicine to psychology, for example, to astronomy. And so it's quite a range of people would cooperate with each other, and these would be trained in as the operatives. So then you go into the first contact, possible scenario, how to do it, what to say, etc. And then we go into, okay, ICER. Now, at the present time, there is a, if there was contact, this is now going back to SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They have protocols dealing with the United Nations. They're the only agency in the world that can do this. And it comes under the International Astronautical Federation of the SETI Permanent Committee. The chairman there, if they get contact, this is in the electromagnetic spectrum, of course, then they will communicate to the United Nations that we've had first contact. We've got all the evidence for it. I have my grave doubts about that. I've been in the field now for 30 years in SETI, and it's not going to work. So this, I think, will work. So anyway, I think I better stop because I got an
I need
yeah, okay, so
you finish. Oh, fantastic exposition.